All right, let's talk about Family Guy Season 24, Episode 11. I was trying to figure out who's really in charge over there at Seth MacFarlane's empire, and it's gotta be this guy, Mark Henteman. This dude has been around since the early days, basically seen it all, and for this episode, he was the showrunner. He's like the grizzled veteran who knows exactly where all the bodies are buried, metaphorically speaking, or maybe literally, knowing this show. He's the one who decided that Peter's butt crack deserved its own storyline, so shout out to him for that. I mean, the man has a long history of pushing boundaries, and this episode is no exception. It's got that signature Family Guy chaos we've come to expect, sometimes to its detriment, sometimes to its absolute glory. We're talking about an episode that starts with religious services and ends with, well, let's just say some questionable life choices made via dating apps. And if you thought that was the wildest ride this episode has to offer, buckle up, because there's a moment involving Stewie and a specific kind of footwear that's going to live rent-free in your head for a while. Seriously, this episode has a bit of everything, from broken pants to broken hearts, and we're going to dissect every last awkward, hilarious, and baffling moment. So hang tight, because this is going to be a deep dive. Before we get too deep into this religious service gone wrong and Peter's subsequent existential crisis via the digital age, do yourself a favor and hit that subscribe button. Seriously, if you're into dissecting animated chaos and occasionally questioning the sanity of the writers, you found your people. We're not just watching these shows, we're analyzing them, poking them with a stick, and seeing what grossness comes out. So yeah, subscribe. It's the least you can do to support this level of intellectual rigor. Think of it as your civic duty to animated comedy analysis. So this episode, Family Guy Season 24, Episode 11, starts off with the Griffins getting honored for charity work, which immediately sets off alarm bells because, well, it's the Griffins. Lois is clearly the driving force behind any actual good deed, dragging Peter along for the ride. The opening sequence is classic Family Guy, that cheesy musical intro about values and then, bam, cut to reality. Peter is furious because he thinks it's the Patriots game and not church. He's wearing a suit that's apparently been too tight for 20 years, which is a fantastic visual gag that sets the tone for Peter's discomfort. Lois explains they're getting a paper certificate for making like 8 sandwiches for the homeless. 8. That's not charity, that's a snack break. But the real conflict here is Peter's absolute refusal to be decent for 5 minutes. He's worried about a priest who plays basketball, which is a very specific and weird detail that's peak Family Guy. And then, the moment of truth. The pants split. It's the kind of public humiliation that only Family Guy could deliver, and it's pretty painful to watch, honestly. Peter's butt is out, the priest is shocked, Lois is mortified. It's a perfect storm of awkwardness. The episode then splits into 2 main storylines. You have Peter's whole, well, butt-related crisis, and then you have Stewie and Brian going to a toddler social event. It's a classic Family Guy structure. 2 totally disconnected plots that somehow have to connect by the end, or just end up being 2 separate episodes mashed together. The writing here feels a bit like they're grasping for straws, trying to make Peter's humiliation into something meaningful, or at least funny enough to carry an entire episode. The pacing felt a little off too, like they had a great idea for the pants rip and then tried to build an entire narrative around it. The jokes are there, but they feel a little forced at times, especially when they're trying to make Peter's ego recovery the main focus. It's the kind of episode that makes you appreciate the tighter, more focused ones, but it's not without its moments of genuine absurdity that only this show can pull off. It's definitely not the best of the season, but it's not the worst either. It's just a Family Guy episode. It exists, and it has jokes. Some land, some don't. That's about it. Let's dive into one of the most memorable and frankly embarrassing moments of this episode, the church pants-splitting incident. Picture this. The Griffins are at church, all dressed up, because they're being honored for some vague charity work that probably involved Lois doing all the heavy lifting. Peter, naturally, is already miserable. He's in a suit that hasn't fit him since the early 2000s, and you can just feel the fabric straining. Lois keeps telling him to behave, to be a normal husband for one day, which for Peter is a Herculean task. Then, during the awards ceremony, the priest announces the winners, the Griffins. And as Peter stands up to accept their prize, a blank piece of paper because the printer ran out of ink, naturally, his pants decide they've had enough.
They rip spectacularly. We get a full-on view of Peter's pasty, middle-aged backside.
The reaction shots are gold. The priest looks horrified, Lois is mortified, and Peter, ever the oblivious narcissist, seems more annoyed that his game is being interrupted than anything else. The camera lingers just long enough for you to feel the cringe. It's the kind of gag that's visceral, uncomfortable, and undeniably a punchline. What makes it work, or rather, what makes it a classic Family Guy moment, is the sheer commitment to the bit. They don't shy away from the vulgarity or the embarrassment. It's a moment that's designed to make you squirm, and it succeeds. It's also a perfect encapsulation of Peter's character, utterly self-absorbed, oblivious to social norms, and constantly finding new and creative ways to embarrass his family. This moment isn't just about a ripped pair of pants, it's about Peter's complete lack of self-awareness and his inability to rise to any occasion. If I were writing this, I'd probably lean even harder into the priest's reaction. Maybe he faints or pulls out a rosary and starts an impromptu exorcism. Or maybe, just maybe, Peter tries to play it off as a new fashion trend. Oh, this? It's called the liberated leg look, very avant-garde. It would have been a nice touch to see Peter's immediate, pathetic attempt to cover himself up, tripping over his own feet or trying to use the blank certificate as a fig leaf. But as it is, the visual is strong enough. It's a moment that defines the episode's tone early on. Expect chaos, expect embarrassment, and expect Peter to be at the center of it all. Another moment that sticks out, and frankly is a little unsettling, is Stewie's interaction with the fashion models. So Stewie and Brian are at this club, and they meet these two models, Sydney and Odette. They're looking for tall guys, and they basically dismiss Brian and Stewie as short, bald bitches. Ouch. But then Sydney and Odette decide to invite them out because they're active, and apparently Brian and Stewie are using Uncle Sam's stilts they bought online. This whole sequence is weird. Stewie, being Stewie, is all about the opportunity to have sex, and he's got this whole sex briefcase prepared. It's a glimpse into Stewie's bizarre, adult-like understanding of sex, filtered through his childlike perspective. The model's dialogue is hilariously shallow, focused entirely on height and superficiality. They're the perfect foil for Brian, who is constantly searching for genuine connection, and Stewie, who's looking for, well, something else entirely. The absurdity of Stewie preparing for sex with a briefcase full of adult items is peak Stewie. It's a callback to his maturity and his uncanny ability to mimic adult behavior. Brian, on the other hand, is just hoping for a date, and he's immediately put off by their shallowness. The model's fascination with Uncle Sam's stilts is also a funny detail, highlighting the superficiality of the scene. If I were rewriting this, I'd probably make the models even more ridiculous. Maybe they communicate entirely through emojis, or have some bizarre, almost alien understanding of human interaction. And for Stewie's sex briefcase, I'd have him pull out something truly unexpected, like a single pristine tic-tac and a note saying, "You're welcome." It would be funnier if his preparation was utterly useless. But the core of the scene, Stewie's misguided sexual ambition and Brian's romantic naivete, is strong. It highlights how these two characters navigate the adult world in their own unique, often dysfunctional ways. The fact that they meet these women who are so focused on superficial traits like height and appearance is a good commentary on dating culture. It's a scene that's both funny and a little sad, which is a sweet spot for Family Guy. Then there's Peter's descent into the world of dating apps. After Lois makes that comment about him being unattractive, Peter is understandably devastated. Joe, being the ever-supportive friend, suggests he make a dating profile to test his desirability. This leads to Peter and his friends trying to create the perfect profile. The humor here comes from the sheer desperation and the ridiculous suggestions they come up with. They're trying to make Peter seem like he has hobbies, like he's outdoorsy, like he's politically active. This is where we get the glorious "We Are Us" sign and the American flag photo op in front of the fire station. It's so forced, so clearly an act, and that's what makes it funny. Peter trying to be something he's not is a classic running gag. The "We Are Us" sign is a masterpiece of vague, meaningless political statement. It's the kind of thing people share online without thinking, and the show skewers it perfectly. Peter also tries to leverage his Steven Tyler sighting, which is a goldmine of an anecdote that he clearly didn't earn. The whole scene of them taking photos is hilarious, with Peter awkwardly posing with a surfboard and then asking to pose in his swim trunks. The beach taco aioli is a nice touch, grounding the absurdity in a bit of real-world messiness. If I were directing this, I'd have Peter trying to one-up Joe and Quagmire with increasingly insane dating profile ideas. Maybe he claims he invented the internet or that he's secretly a spy. And for the "We Are Us" sign, I'd have it photoshopped onto a picture of him in a compromising position. The writers did a good job of showing Peter's insecurity and his desperate need for validation. It's a little sad, but it's also incredibly funny because of how poorly he executes it. The dating app premise allows the show to poke fun at modern social interactions and the curated perfection we present online. Peter's attempts to craft this ideal persona are doomed from the start, which is exactly what we expect and enjoy. It's a relatable struggle, taken to an extreme Family Guy level. Now, let's talk about the character dynamics, specifically how Peter's insecurity fuels this whole episode. We start with Peter, utterly clueless and self-centered, attending a church event he clearly doesn't want to be at. He's more concerned with his ill-fitting suit and the possibility of missing a football game than any actual spiritual or charitable pursuit. The moment his pants rip, his ego takes the biggest hit. It's not just public embarrassment, it's a blow to his fragile sense of self. This is where Lois's cutting remark about his attractiveness comes in, which, while harsh, is probably something she's thought for a while. This comment is the catalyst for Peter's dating app adventure. He needs validation, and he needs to prove that he's still desirable, despite his age, his weight, and his general buffoonery. Joe and Quagmire, bless their hearts, are there to enable him, offering terrible advice and participating in the ridiculous photo shoots. This is classic friend group behavior, where the friends egg each other on even if it's a terrible idea. Joe, in particular, seems to be the voice of reason, but even he gets caught up in the absurdity. Quagmire is just Quagmire, looking for any opportunity to mention his sex life. Stewie, meanwhile, is off on his own adventure, exploring his own brand of precocious sexuality. His interactions with Brian, and later the models, show his advanced understanding of social dynamics, albeit skewed by his own warped perspective. Brian is the straight man, the voice of reason, constantly trying to navigate the insane logic of his family and friends. He's the one who's most likely to point out the ridiculousness of the situation, but he's also often dragged into it. The episode does a decent job of balancing these storylines, even if they feel a bit disjointed at times. Peter's journey on the dating app is the main focus, and his interactions with Joe and Quagmire are the source of most of the jokes. Stewie's plot provides a contrast, showing a different kind of social exploration. The dynamic between Brian and Stewie is always a highlight, and their interactions here are no exception, even if they're a little more adult-oriented than usual. It's a testament to the show's ability to juggle multiple characters and plot threads, even if the quality of those threads varies. Let's dig into some of the subtle stuff you might have missed. First off, that opening song, "It Seems Today That All You See," it's a direct parody of the theme song from the classic TV show All in the Family, which starred Carol O'Connor as Archie Bunker. That show was famous for its conservative, bigoted protagonist who clashed with modern societal values. By using that song, Family Guy is immediately setting up a parallel between Peter and Archie, both characters who are out of step with the times and often represent older, more problematic viewpoints. It's a clever way to signal the episode's themes about societal change and personal values. Another thing to notice is the sheer number of callbacks and running gags they weave in. The tight suit Peter wears, that's been a joke for years, dating back to times when he's had to wear formal wear, and it's always been a struggle. And the Griffin's Law legislation Peter mentions about only being able to use the bathroom in a steakhouse if you order something, that was a real, albeit short-lived, piece of legislation in Rhode Island that they've referenced before. It's those little nods to past jokes and real-world absurdity that add layers to the Family Guy humor. Think about Peter's profile picture on the dating app, the argument at the Ponderosa Steakhouse. That's a very specific, almost mundane scenario that they've chosen to represent Peter. It's not a glamorous photo. It's him being Peter. It says a lot about how they view his character. And when Stewie's talking about the toddler social event, he mentions an invitation and Uber being strongly encouraged. This is a hilarious jab at modern parenting trends and the lengths people go to for their kids' social lives, even if those kids are just toddlers. It also highlights Stewie's precocious nature, his awareness of these societal trends. It's these details, scattered throughout the background and dialogue, that reward close listening and viewing. They're not just filler. They're part of the show's tapestry of running jokes and cultural commentary. Now, what if they did things differently? Let's take Peter's pants ripping in church. It's a great visual gag, but what if it led to something more profound, or just plain weirder? Instead of Peter just getting embarrassed and then trying to fix his ego with a dating app, what if the pants ripping was the start of an actual spiritual crisis for him? Like he sees it as a sign from God, and he starts trying to become a more pious person, which, for Peter, would be an absolute disaster.
Imagine him trying to live by the 10 Commandments or attending daily mass, all while still being Peter. The comedy would come from his utter failure and the chaos he'd unleash in his misguided attempt at sainthood. Or consider Stewie's interaction with the models. What if, instead of the models being shallow and only interested in height, they were actually interested in Stewie's intellect and his bizarre plans? Imagine them being impressed by his sex briefcase and trying to collaborate with him on some nefarious plot. It would turn the scene on its head, making Stewie the manipulator and the models the willing accomplices. It would lean into Stewie's genius and his ability to charm or coerce others into his schemes. The current version is funny because of the superficiality, but a version where Stewie outsmarts even the models would be even more satisfyingly Stewie-esque. It's about playing with expectations and pushing the absurdity even further than they did. The dating app plot, while funny, could have also gone in a different direction. Instead of just trying to prove he's desirable, what if Peter used the app to genuinely try and find love, or at least a decent conversation? That would be a completely different episode, one that might have been more emotionally resonant, but probably less funny. The writers clearly went for the quick laughs and the cringe humor, which is their bread and butter, but it's always fun to think about the paths not taken. So this episode lands at a solid 7.4 out of 10 for me. It gets points for the sheer audacity of the church pants rip, which is a classic Family Guy move. It also gets points for Peter's dating app subplot, which is a pretty solid commentary on modern dating culture and his inherent insecurity. The visual of him trying to look outdoorsy with that "We Are Us" sign is pure gold. It loses points for the Stewie and Brian plot, which felt a bit disconnected and didn't quite land with the same punch.
The models felt like a weak attempt at edgy humor, and Stewie's sex briefcase joke, while funny in concept, was a bit overdone. The episode really shines when it's just about Peter being Peter and his struggles with ego and aging. What would have pushed the score higher? A more cohesive storyline, where the Stewie and Brian plot actually felt like it contributed to the overall themes, or at least had some crossover with Peter's story. Maybe Stewie could have accidentally given Peter some terrible dating advice, or vice versa. Ultimately, this episode is for the die-hard fans who appreciate the show's willingness to go to dark and embarrassing places. It's not an episode that will necessarily convert new viewers, but for those of us who are already invested in the Griffin's dysfunction, it provides plenty of laughs and a few moments of genuine discomfort. And that's exactly what we've come to expect from the show, even if Mark Hentemann and his team are pushing the boundaries a little further than usual, sometimes landing a haymaker, sometimes just whiffing at the air, but always committed to the bit. This episode, much like Peter's ill-fitting suit, is a little stretched and a little uncomfortable, but it holds together just enough to get the job done. And much like that suit, it's not going to win any fashion awards, but it's definitely memorable for all the wrong, and therefore right, reasons.